So I'm very excited to introduce my guest today. He is someone that perhaps on the face of it you might not know who Jim Whelan is, but when you get to
Nobody knows
know
who I am, Tom.
well, when you get to know the fact that this man for 50 years has been part of iconic British television, obviously I came to him through the Royle Family. This is why we're going to speak to him today. But I must say that in learning the career and reading the terrific book Imposter. We'll get to Imposter. We'll give it a good plug
Oh,
when we
yeah.
get into it. But and learning all the different roles and such a fascinating career that he's had. So very excited to speak to Jim Whelan. How's it going?
Good evening, Tom. Nice to speak to you.
Very nice to speak to you as well. And there is an irony. I just discussing generally in terms of your career that, as I say, people might not be aware of you, but you've been part of gigantic Corrie episodes. You're in the Queen of Sheba. You've been in so many cult TV shows. Like, people do know you.
Yes, they do. And in fact, I have clips of almost everything I've ever been in. And
Yeah.
this just happened by accident that I've been down in Eastbourne. Helen and I've been down here 9.5 years now. And we moved down to be near to our children and grandchildren who are about both on the south coast.
Mm.
And I was playing badminton one day and a chap said to me, I've just seen you on television on YouTube, 1973, a program called Crown Court. I said, yes, well, I was in that, but I've never seen it. He said, I'll send you the clip. And he's just a person I met at badminton, a thoroughly nice chap, but we didn't
Yeah.
go out drinking or anything. And
No.
then he made it his business to send me all these clips, and I don't
Mm.
know where he found them from. And so I then had 60 or so clips, and it brought it all back to me, right from the beginning, from Crown Court. When I first started going to Granada, I was an extra because I was an amateur actor and I
Hmm.
became a club singer in
Yeah.
pubs and clubs. And I was taken on by an agent at my request, came to see me in an amateur dramatic show at
Mm.
Altrincham Garrick, of all places. Took me on and said to me, darling, you will have to become a background artist till you get some experience. And I stayed as an extra for 5 years in Coronation Street. We went over to Yorkshire to the newly opened Yorkshire Television Studios. They'd only just got the
Mm.
franchise. And I was an extra in for 5 years, and it was quite soul destroying. But then I started getting a couple of lines, and then I had my moment when my agent phoned one day and said, you have an audition tomorrow down at Granada for
Mm.
4 lines in Coronation Street, man in corner shop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
off I
Yeah.
went. I got the job. I was the man in the corner shop. My
With
friend.
Rita, right? You with
Yes,
Rita.
and that was my first speaking part on British television. So I've got all the clips. So I kind of started in Corrie
Mm.
and worked my way through it, manning corner shop. I must have had another 6 or 7 speaking roles before I became the Reverend Todd. I
Yeah.
was another vicar. I was the Reverend Pike 30 years ago and buried Lisa Duckworth. I mean, the
Oh yeah, the doc. Yeah.
aficionados might remember her,
Of
and so on.
course. Of course.
And so that's how it's gone. Carry on.
It's an insane story. And you mentioned you mentioned being an extra there.
Yeah.
And you made an interesting analogy in the book, actually. You were like, oh yeah, Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant's extras, that was spot on. Like, what were the parallels that you were seeing? Because obviously most of us are familiar with that show. Like, so it really was true to life for you.
One of the main parallels was in one of the earlier programs, he started inching very slowly into shot.
Right, right.
And then when the shot had finished, the cameraman, someone, the floor manager said to the cameraman, did you manage to lose that fat? Bah, bah, bah? And he
Yeah.
said, yeah, I got rid of him. So that kind of thing was happening all the time. People would stand artfully at the bar on in the Rovers and so on.
Hmm.
But I would never do that, honestly, I swear, because you got used less if you'd been seen more. Because if
Ah,
you were seen in the Rovers playing darts, you might not get something else a bit later on. So it was
sure.
better not to be seen. But
Mm.
extras were also given lines. Not people don't know this, but this is how it
Mm.
happened. If they were doing a scene mainly in Coronation Street and it didn't make sense, the floor manager would be walking around with his cams on talking to the gallery.
Hmm.
And you'd hear one side of the conversation that went something like, um, yeah, we need something at the beginning, don't we? Yeah, okay, I'll do it. And then he would look at amongst the extras, and one day he picked on me and he pointed to me and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Jim." He said, "Jim, can you wait outside the door of the Rovers when I say action, come up to the bar, get your beer and take it and sit down there?" Of course I can, because now I was a directed extra. Now, you
Yes.
couldn't just do it, you had to be directed by the floor manager.
Yeah.
So he said, "Okay, we'll have a little rehearsal. On we go and action." So Jim walked in up to the bar. Betty Turpin came out and she said to me, "Yes, love, what can I get you?" And I said, because I wasn't allowed to speak.
Right.
So this was a kind of a game. And then the floor manager knew what was going on. Everybody
Mm.
kind of knew. And he said, "All right, hold it there." And then he was speaking to upstairs again. "Yeah, okay. Well, I'll see if he can manage it." He said, "Jim, ask for the beer, speak, and then take the beer, say thank you, go and sit down over there with your change. Can you do that?"
Mm.
And I said, "Yes," because by that time I had been an actor for 20 years, an amateur actor.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it was any good, but my
No.
accent was correct because I was from Salford. Salford is Weatherfield. He said, "All right, we'll have another little rehearsal." He said, "Okay," and action. So I walked up to the bar. Betty came up and said, "Yes, love, what can I get you?" "Pint of mild, Betty, love." "Yes, Pet, thank you. Thank you very much." I went and sat down. Now, this was a special deal with Equity that you could do this just to make a scene,
Mm.
but you had to pay the extra double money.
Okay.
So these little lines were much sought after. And after a
Yeah.
while, the floor manager got to know who could do it and who couldn't, because, a lot of the extras simply couldn't do it because they weren't actors.
Yeah.
They were just retired people or mainly club acts from Yorkshire and everywhere else. And they had no interest in being an actor, but that's what I wanted to do.
I mean,
So
did
I was one of the ones that was picked upon to do that kind of thing. And then I got my four lines and it took off from there. And since then, I've played in 50 or 60 different whatever programs.
yeah, yeah, it's insane the legacy. But I mean, even then, when you were an extra on this show, like people don't appreciate now that Corrie was like the show, right? It was like a juggernaut. It was like one of the most watched things. 20 million people were seeing you speak to Betty. Like that's did that blow your mind back then? That was something crazy to think.
It did. And when I first got the lines, I thought, well, this is it now. I'm
Yeah.
pretty good. And a friend of mine, Peter Martin, who we'll speak about later,
Hmm.
but Peter Martin was also an extra at one time. He was a club singer and comedian from
Your
York.
old milkman nemesis, right? He beat you out for a
Well, yes. And I've got over that. No. Peter was around one day and I said, "Peter, I'm doing this." He said, "Don't worry, sunshine. When this goes out, you'll be catapulted to obscurity."
yeah.
And
Yes.
that's what happened. So nothing happened. And then
No.
3 months later, I got my next speaking part and my next one and my next one. But the point that a lot of people don't know is when you are a small part player,
Mm.
you are the least important actor on that set.
Yes.
And when you walk onto Coronation Street, you're there for 2 days maybe with your small part. And
Mm.
you're acting with people who've been in the show for 5, 10, 20. Now, in one case, 64 years.
Mm.
Bill
Mm.
Roach, Ken Barlow.
That is,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it was difficult. Some people who knew you knew what you were doing. But no, I was never in danger of being mobbed. But you're quite
No.
right. Coronation Street at that time, they were like pop stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was only on twice a week, and they
That's
got
right.
18, 20 million per week. And um, all of them, there was only a core cast of about 15,
Mm.
became 20. Now it's
Yeah.
70, 80, 90.
Yes.
They're
It's
working
grueling.
all the time with three camera crews
Hmm.
around the clock. So it's a different
And
beast.
it used to be filmed in order, right? They do like in 12-minute bits. Like that's
Yes.
what one take.
Yes, in actual fact, one take. I won't
Unbelievable.
go into the whole of that, but
Yeah.
it was. And what made me write about it was I listened to an interview a few years ago with Bill Roach,
Mm.
and someone said to Bill, when it first went, it was live, Bill. They had a dozen episodes live, live.
I know.
And he said, yes, but that wasn't the most frightening. And then he described the bit you're talking about when you
Mm,
had to do a 12-minute take in one. And that was more pressure because half an hour you went on, you did it. If somebody said a rude word, which I never did, it still went out. You were finished after half an hour. And
mm-hmm.
that's how I've gone on. I've been a small part, unimportant player for all that time.
Did you have any interaction with Conceptia Hewitt, the first landlady on Cora, who of course played Mary in Royal Family? Was that your era or no?
It was, but I was an extra then.
Yeah,
And
did you know of her then? Like, because
I
I haven't really seen
vaguely,
any clips. Yeah,
I didn't know her because the
no,
extras didn't speak
right,
to
right.
the main players. We were two different tribes.
Mm.
And so I knew her. And of course, I knew of her. And then I met her a few years later and had that
Yes.
lovely scene with her.
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, we'll get to that. But I just want to stick on
Yeah,
Corrie
yeah,
for
yeah.
a second because again, it is mad. You look at all these incredible wedding scenes, and there you are. Like, admittedly, you say in the book yourself, normally they're cutting away from the boring vicar. You know, we're not actually looking at what you're doing. But
Yeah.
even still, these monumentous moments. I remember as a kid watching these weddings, like these. This was box office, and like you were part of it.
Well, the funny thing is, you're quite right. And there's a quote somewhere that said, ordinary lives or ordinary scenes can be made special by
Mm,
distance. I'm 82 years old now. My first speaking part was 50 something years ago. So people come up to me. I do cruises all the time
yeah.
now, or I have done.
Mm,
And we've done 11, 12 cruises in the last 2.5 years. During that time, I show clips and I talk about them,
mm.
and people are the nostalgia quotient in those really seems to attract people, and they come up to me in between the talks and say, I remember that, but I didn't know it was you. Like Stephen Karen's wedding,
Stephen Cat, of
Vera's
course.
funeral,
Yeah.
Jason and Sarah's wedding, and things like that.
Yeah.
So yes, the further away they get, the more exotic somehow they are.
But
And things that I thought nothing about at the time, like Liver Birds. I did three different characters in Liver Birds, and one was a policeman, and I had to sing You'll
mm,
Never Walk Alone because I was keeping the crowd back
yeah.
while Lucian, one of the main characters, Michael Angelis,
Hmm.
was on the roof of the Liver building, and he was going to throw himself off if they didn't bring his rabbits back.
Right.
And I was
Okay.
holding the crowd back, and part of my luck was I had to sing You'll Never Walk Alone, and that brought
Mm,
him back. But that was, they put the football, they put the Liverpool crowd singing it in a little bit of that. But it was no big deal at the time for a Manchester United supporter to sing You'll Never Walk Alone. But now people make more of it than we did then.
hmm hmm
And
And
I never had any idea that these clips, once they were gone, as far as I was concerned, they were gone. And I never saw them because I'd be out working in a club. I didn't stay in to watch myself
mm,
particularly. And they were gone. There were no
yeah,
videos.
yeah, ephemeral.
Nobody had video machines.
No, nothing on
Once it was
demand.
done, it was done.
Hmm.
And now they're still around.
It is marvelous to see. And yeah, going on your Twitter, we'll link down below. You've posted so many of those clips, and it was great to discover those and ones that I've only seen on IMDb. And I'm like, okay, here he is playing this clerk or whatnot.
And
But
the
yeah,
funny thing about them is that John, my friend, I said to him one day, John, those clips that you sent me are better than the original. He said, yes, because when in the Live Birds, for instance, the BBC would come up and shoot all the exteriors and
mm,
then go back to London, do the interiors and show on a big screen the bits they'd shot. And the same happened with Last of the Summer Wine. So
yes.
when they were shooting it, they shot on film,
Hmm.
went back to London, taped them, put the film in. So the film has weathered much better than the tapes. So some
Yes.
of the clips now, if you look at some of I mean, I can send you a few if you like.
Mm,
If you look at some of the liver birds from 50 years ago, they are exquisite because they are filmed with a lot of care at
hmm
the
hmm
time.
hmm No, I'd love to go back and watch some of that stuff actually and explore that. And just finally on Corrie, there's a really nice bit in your book because you talk about Corrie quite extensively, and you give people what they want in the book, which is what I like. You give a little gossip, and you just you share a lot of stories. But you talk about Karen and Steve's wedding,
Yeah.
and the fact that you were fluffing up your lines, which is understandable. It was a high pressure situation, but these two pros, Saran Jones and Simon Gregson, they pretended to stumble right to put you at ease. Like I thought that was really sweet.
Yes, and I didn't realize it at the time.
No.
And it wasn't until I got back and we were having lunch and Steve, Simon, and I were
Yeah.
sharing a van. And I suddenly realized, and I said, "You'd no, I didn't." But he had done, and I knew he
Yeah.
had. And Saran Jones was such a pro, and she was quite fierce that she did the
Oh,
same. Now they could see I was in trouble, and
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
bit
yeah.
of self-preservation in there for them because they don't want to be there all day while a poor old vicar stumbles his way through. But
Hmm.
the circumstances fluffed me a bit, and so
Yeah.
I was very grateful to them. And it happened even more seriously with Ray Winston a few years later
Mm.
in Jimmy Grimble
Yes, of course.
when I had a
Yes.
kind of panic attack, and he helped me out of it.
The
Yeah.
blind seller. That's another great role of yours there. Like I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah,
Who gives the magic boots?
that's right.
It's terrific.
I
But
know.
it's interesting as well. I was coming at your book when I was reading it from obviously a Royle family perspective, and it was fun to see where your paths had crossed, not crossed, but whatever. You were both on Coronation Street at the same time as Mary. You also shared a trailer with Andrew Wyman, Kirk from the Royle family
That's
during
right.
this wedding. Is that right?
Yes. No, not his wedding. It.
No, it was the Stephen Saran.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. With
yeah,
things. Yes.
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
did. Yes, I did.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the funny thing was, I haven't written about that day he'd bought a brand new Mercedes,
Right.
and
Yes,
somebody
Andrew.
tail-ended him the first morning.
No.
And so he spent all
Kirk.
day on on the phone to the insurance company. And when he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, the poor old fella got out of his car, he'd run into the back of me," and
Mm.
he said, "Oh, bloody hell, it's you," and that kind of thing. But that stuck in my mind because if you bought yourself a
Oh,
new Merc, and I mean, he was a
yeah.
working class lad. That's the thing about Corrie. It
Hmm.
would be one of the few ways that someone who wasn't trained or known would get to be famous. And I mean, he's still there
True.
20 odd years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, he is. He is. Yeah, you mentioned him being a Man U fan like yourself.
Yes,
And, again, that's something that runs through the book, your love of the club. And just to go back in time a little bit, you were there at the first game after the Munich air disaster, right?
yes, I was.
And you walked that.
I, I uh, when I was age 15, I started work on Manchester docks at a firm
Yeah.
called Manchester Liners, and I was the office boy.
Hmm.
And I went up to Old Trafford just before that with my cousin Michael, now long gone. And we watched it and we were just entranced.
Yeah.
And so we went from that. That was it for me from then. And so for a full season, I watched all the Busby Babes. And the first team I ever watched was Raywood in goals. Duncan Edwards played. Um, Billy Whelan, who I used to
Mm.
claim to people was a cousin of mine, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Um, Dennis Violet, Bobby Charlton was just coming in,
Mm.
Johnny Berry was on the wing. The colossus that was Duncan Edwards, I can't tell you what a loss he was.
Hmm.
Roger Byrne was left back and he was captained and so on. So I watched all of those. And then the crash happened
Yeah.
on a Wednesday or something. And the weekend game afterwards was cancelled against Wolves. And Wolves were the top of the league with United at the time. And on the Wednesday, I got permission to leave work early and I ran up to the ground. I couldn't get in at my normal scoreboard end. I walked round the side thinking I wouldn't get in, but I squeezed in at the Stretford end and I was there for that game. I know a lot of people have claimed to be there, but really I was there and
Mm.
I had the programme for many years. The programme we bought had no United team in it because they were printed a few days in advance and it was
Yes.
just blank. So you wrote the team in yourself. And I remember Shea Brennan scoring and poor old Sheffield Wednesday were just blown away. It
Mm.
was, I did feel for them even so.
Yeah, that's
But
remarkable.
yeah, another thing is, and I've just
Mm.
written a little piece that might be in United We Stand for Tom.
Oh,
I mean, I can send you
excellent.
the football now in a lot of ways has changed for the worse. I'm still as avid as ever and I still
Mm.
watch all the games down here, but I can't take to the absolute enmity and hate between fans because a
Mm.
group of us when I was 17, 18, 19 used to go to Old Trafford one week, Main Road the next week because some of us were City fans and the
Right.
humour and the crack was better at Main Road at that time because the gallows humour was terrific.
Mm.
We'd come up with a gag, we'd say something like, "Hey, oh, it was in the paper the other day, Billy, our City fan. A City fan was caught climbing over the wall at Main Road, and the police made him go in and watch the second half. You know, that kind of thing. And it was all good fun, and
Yeah,
there
it's
was
funny.
no bad feeling. Now there seems to be a lot of hate around, which is not for me.
So okay, touched on Corrie. Not only Corrie, Brookside as well.
Yes.
You know, if you say to anyone really, what is the most iconic Brookside storyline, they can tell you it's the body under the patio. And you were the judge there. You had a lot of big scenes in this.
I did have a lot of scenes, and in fact, I was the clerk of the court. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to read
Yes.
out all the charges to
10
start.
episodes you're in, yeah.
And then at the end, you are charged. How do you plead and all that? Yes. And I got it because someone was ill. I was in an
Oh, yes.
agency
Yeah.
at the time, and the person was ill, and I got
Mm,
the job at the last second. So poor old Tony, died 3 months later. So I
oh,
went there. I had no time to be nervous or anything. I learnt my lines and went, and we did it. And we
mm,
were there for 9 days. And when it came out, it was the most watched program not only Brookside had ever had, but the biggest program Channel 4 had ever had at
wow.
that time, which was 10 million. And they used to get three normally.
Yeah.
Phil Redmond, who owned Mersey Television and ran the program, was very
Mm,
clever, and he didn't want anyone to know the verdict.
mm,
And so he shot two endings because
yeah.
you can't keep it secret on a film set. It's not possible because there are maybe 75 people working there. On that particular set, there were 20 actors, 30 extras, lighting, cameramen, technicians, props, 75 people in all. So he shot two endings and didn't tell anyone what it was going to be. So the dailies were in a ferment about what it was,
Yeah.
and people were interviewed on telly, and even I was on Five Live, you know.
Yes.
And as soon as he found out, come on, Jim, you must know it. You've read it out. I said, yes, but he's done too. So I don't, you've never seen anyone get the elbow so quick.
Right.
Very, very unseemly.
Ah, okay. But also around this time, Jim, this is what really fascinated me about going through your IMDb because it's like, yeah, yeah, you know, you'd imagine he's on Artbeat, he's on Last of the Summer Wine. It's like this is all kind of the canon classics. You're in a Todd Haynes film, the acclaimed art house director.
Yes,
And I just watched this film with my girlfriend over the weekend. I'd never heard of this film, Velvet Goldmine.
yes,
I enjoyed it very much. It is a very out there picture, which is essentially an alternative glam rock history murder mystery.
yes.
Um, I love that you were part of it.
And even more exciting now because
Mm,
is that I played Todd Haynes' father.
right.
I don't know whether you picked that up, but
I
one of
didn't
the main
actually
characters
know.
was an unknown Todd Haynes.
Oh.
And I was playing his father. And
Mm,
in the Manchester part of the film early on, Todd Haynes' father finds him doing something unspeakable to do with the gay situation, realized he was gay, and threw him out of the house. So
hmm.
um, when I got to the set, everyone sat me down and ignored me for about 4 days. But I
Yeah.
didn't care because I was getting a very good, payment each day.
Yeah.
And on
Yeah.
the fourth day, I went and Todd Haynes was there and he said, okay, nice to see you. This is Todd. And I said, "Oh, hello, Todd." Todd Haynes sounded like me. And I thought, he's a Manchester lad. I didn't know him from Adam.
Oh.
Todd Haynes was taken out of school to play a leading role as a boy in not Royal Hunt of the Sun, something like that.
Mm, mm,
Prisoner of War, very famous picture. And
yeah.
I think David Lean directed it. And from
Right.
then on, he was on an upward trajectory. And this was one of his first major roles. And every time I went down to the set of the dressing room, he would ask for me and he
Mm,
wanted to speak to me. And I thought, this young lad, he's doing all right. He always wants
yeah.
this. He must think I'm really interesting. And about a few days later, just before I finished, I said to Todd Haynes said to me, to be fair, he said, Jim, we have some lovely images up there on the screen. I'm very pleased. And I was over the moon. I said,
Yeah.
tell me something. Why does this Todd Haynes fellow want to speak to me all the time? He said, because he wants your accent. I said, but he already speaks like me. Is he not from it? He said, no. He said, he's American. He's going to be a big star any day now. but he speaks like that all the time. He
Mm,
was that driven even then
mm.
that in the hotel, I didn't stay at their hotel, I stayed at a B&B. In the hotel, he would go around talking Manchester like that, not Oasis, just the
Yeah.
generic northern accent.
This is
And he
Christian
wanted,
Christian Bale, sorry, this is you're talking about, or
yes,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Christian. Did I not say Christian Bale before? So
Said
I
Todd,
played
yeah,
Chris.
it's yeah, Christian Bale. So
Oh,
you play his father basically in the film.
yes, yes,
And yeah, he's kind of the main character who had
that's
this
right, that's
interweaving.
right.
But
And he
you
wanted,
basically only have one scene. You essentially you were seen briefly sitting downstairs, but you essentially
yeah,
have this one scene where you're admonishing him when you come upon him, pleasuring himself in front of this, glam icon,
yeah.
and you excoriate him, and you really get a good spotlight to act, and you're quite terrifying. Actually, it's a really good scene.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
It's
He,
convincing.
but he said to me, he said, do it. He said, if you want to hit me, do it. And of course,
Christian.
I didn't have to, the other way around, he might get away with that. I couldn't go hitting film stars and so on. And you know something? It was up for an Oscar
Hmm.
for costumes.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it.
It's
No,
gained. I think when it came out, I think reviews were a bit mixed, which I can understand because it's quite experimental. It's quite out there, but it's definitely its legacy. It's earned a big following. Like I don't know if I don't know if have you heard of this website Letterboxd? Are you familiar with this website?
no, no.
It's you should check it out. It's basically where people just review films. Like it's just
Right.
all about talking
Yeah.
about movies. So you get really recent reviews. And I was reading stuff that people had written about Velvet Goldmine in the last month or so, and it really is this
But it
quite
didn't
important
finish
film.
up. It didn't finish up being the film it started out. Todd
No.
Haynes told me because they had an agreement, and this is why they did the film, that they could use David Bowie's music.
Oh, of course, yes. Yeah,
And he pulled out, and they
he did.
didn't use any of it because he wanted to do his own film. Was it The Man Who Fell to Earth? Oh, whatever it was, I can't remember. But he
Mm.
pulled out and left them in the lurch. But they were so far in that they carried on, and then they used different songs, which worked. But I think had they used David Bowie's music, it could have been a sensation.
Yeah, it's the soundtrack's very interesting because you have your central figure, Brian Slade, who is like the
Yeah,
Bowie analog, and all of his music is original, but obviously it's Bowie-esque, it's Ziggy-esque. But then there are real songs in the film as well, and it's all told in this like Citizen Kane backwards,
yes, it
back and
is.
forth through time. Like
Yeah,
it's a really interesting piece actually, and now on your IMDb, you're also listed as being on another Hollywood movie, but I'm convinced it's wrong. You're listed as being in Nicolas Cage's Snake Eyes.
yeah, I'm not in it.
I watched the whole
Never,
movie looking for you, and you're not in it.
never. Really?
Yeah.
Do you know something? I couldn't. I tried to get it deleted, but it wouldn't delete, so I just left it there. But no, it wasn't me. Yeah.
Honestly, there is someone called the mayor, and he's in the background, and he looks a bit like you. And I was like, "Is that him?" But like, it isn't you.
God, I've
It's
been
not a
found
very good
out.
film.
Oh,
It's a
right.
weird movie.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll scratch that one off.
The other film, by the way, that we might come to was
Yeah.
There's Only One Jimmy Grimble,
Well,
which
let's get
I
to that
did.
next because that is again growing up. I love that movie. I've always loved that film. I feel like it got overshadowed as you mentioned the book by Billy Elliot,
Yes.
which came out on the same weekend, and I think still it's in its shadow a little bit. I know they're not really that similar, but they're both sort of coming of age, perseverance
Yeah.
stories. But
Yeah.
great movie, great football movie, great kid movie, uplifting film, great film.
It seems to be another one that the
Yeah.
further away it gets, the better it gets to certain people. And
Hmm.
I've had people I've somebody found me down here and said, um, "Will you? Can I come and have a photograph with you?" And I'm sending you, if you'll allow me, two posters, and will you sign them? And this person is just fanatical about that film.
Right, right, right.
And when I was up in Manchester, he found out, I don't know how, that I was up in Manchester visiting friends, Helen and I. And he said, will you come down and have a photo taken with me? And I did. So it's another film that seems to have taken on a life of its own the further away it gets.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Ray Winston before, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you guys had a great relationship. Really got on.
I was frightened of him to start with, not
No, I mean,
physically,
yeah, I get it, but
but Ray was a big star.
oh
But
my
he
God,
made me feel
legend.
right at home straight away. We bonded over football. He's a West
Hmm.
Ham fan. I'm United.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was lovely. and he was helpful. And I was so nervous doing a feature film, and I had a close up. And when you have a close up in a feature film, I know it's a cliche, but believe me, it is scary
Yeah.
because you've got a £300,000 camera 1 foot from your nose. You've got a director whispering in your ear. You've got the light man telling you you must look in a certain direction. You don't look at the person you're talking to. I know I was blinded. And all this is going through your mind. And I started shaking. And Ray helped me by every time just before we said action, he would reach out and squeeze me so hard and it hurt. Nothing was
Mm,
said at this time. This
mm,
went on for
mm,
about
mm.
half an hour and then I
Wow.
was okay after that. So no, I've nothing but affection for him. He won't remember it. Don't worry about that. But I won't forget it, hurry.
You mentioned quite an extravagant moment with a limo in the movie that you were
With
surprised at.
Ray.
It like took you
Yes,
to the other
yes,
side of the stadium, right?
that's
Yeah.
right. We
Mm,
were filming near the main stand, my bit at the back of the main stand, and the car park we were parked in, all the trailers were at the other side of
mm,
the ground, near to it, just outside the other entrance. And one day a knock came at the door, and I opened it, and this liveried chauffeur was there. He said, "Come to take you to the location, sir." I said, "It won't be a minute." And I closed the door, said, "Ray, there's someone other," and he said, "Well, but yeah." He said, "Just play the game, son. Just play the game." So we went out and we jumped in the limo and we drove round to the front and we got out and walked in the front to where the set was. And the people who'd walked around the pitch were there before us.
mm.
So it was ludicrous, but it had been booked, so it had to be used.
Yeah, yeah. That's no, and I mean, so many great people in that movie as well. Gina
I know.
McKee, I love her. Like,
Yeah,
Ben
yeah,
Miller as well. It
yes,
really is a feast.
yeah, yeah. Robert Carlyle.
Yeah, Robert Carlyle, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And do you know who was in it? Have you picked up the girl who played Jimmy Grimble's girlfriend?
who was that again? Remind me.
It was Samia Gadi,
Mm,
who is now Samia Lombanchon, and went more or less. She was about 14, I think, and she went almost straight from there into Coronation Street, and she's still there,
that's
and
right.
she is
That's right.
Maria.
Maria, of course,
Yes,
iconic character. Yeah,
yes, she is.
great.
And I buried on the scene her stillborn child, Paul,
I remember that. Yeah,
and at the time she was married to Liam. But Liam was having an affair with Carla. Keep up, keep up.
Carla.
And the director was a Huddersfield Town fan, and we were there having the crack about the football. And it was a lovely
Mm,
sunny day, and he was saying, "You don't know any of the bloody United supporters don't know anything. This is the director." And I said, "Well, where's Huddersfield anyway?" We were having a laugh.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then suddenly an estate car pulled up, not a hearse, an estate car,
Mm,
and they opened it up, and there was a little white polystyrene coffin,
oh,
a bit about a foot long,
mm,
and that was the prop and everything went quiet. And I know it's only make believe, but believe me, from then on, it was the most somber day we've ever had. And
yeah,
it was,
yeah.
of course, Maria was crying and Liam was crying, and they carried it into the church and all that.
Mm,
And when we were going out to the grave where we finished up, Samia said to me, "Jim, do you remember when in Jimmy Grimble, when the boy who was playing Jimmy Grimble and me were looking for you, looking for Robbie Brewer on all these gravestones?" Says, "Yes," he said, "it was here at the church in Prestwich."
oh,
Yeah. So she's lovely and always
yeah.
has been nice. And yeah,
I mean, you bring up Corrie, which reminded me because I I watched a certain era of Corrie, Jim. I was born in '92, so I watched soaps a lot when I was maybe primary school age. So
right.
definitely maybe like late '90s, early 2000s was like my era. So let me just throw to you. These are my top three personal favorite Corrie characters. And one of them, I know that you know him because you've mentioned him in the book. And I was really happy that you mentioned this guy because, like, yeah, I love this guy. So my top three, in no particular order. I love Blanche.
Yes. Yes.
I think she's an. I mean, I forget the actress name. Sorry, not to be rude, but I love her
I
so
can't
much.
remember.
No, she's a treat.
She was lovely.
Norris.
Norris Cole.
Oh my
Yes.
god, his
Yeah.
timing,
And he was,
hilarious character.
yes, he was.
Mm.
And he was a very good actor, you know, and
Yes.
he knocked around for, and he might have been in an agency. He was round about the time we were all struggling a bit, and before he made it, and he was always complaining about, so oh, I can't get any,
Right.
can't get any of this. Next thing you know, he's in Corrie, and the rest was history. Yes.
Oh. Well,
Who's
and
number one?
number one is played by David Nielsen, Roy Cropper.
Yeah,
I've always thought Roy, even as a child, when I didn't have a sophisticated palate, I just watched TV. Even as
yeah,
a kid, I
yeah,
was like, this guy's a really good actor. Like, this is a really
yes,
good, unique, bespoke performance. Like, he's a very impressive actor.
yes. And Helen and I met him at Oldham Rep once because uh, Julie Hedman Halch, who
Hmm.
played his wife in the program. His husband is a playwright and had written a play, and it was on at Oldham Rep. And we happened to go to see it, Helen and I, with some friends. And David was there because David was a friend of his as well.
Mm.
And so David came up to me that time. We'd done what have we done? The wedding scene where Roy had to give up the baby at some stage back to Tracy. Does that strike it? You know.
Don't ring a bell,
Anyway,
yeah.
and he came up to us and said, "Oh, by the way, your stuff's on next week." I said, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh no," he said, "I've seen it. It's okay." And we had a really good chat. And he and his wife was a special needs teacher.
Mm.
And my Helen was a special needs teacher
Mhm.
for 30 something years. So they got chatting all the time. And Helen said, when David did something he did with a tin of, he either turned it round with a kind of OCD type. And Helen said that we have several who do that. And she said to David, David's wife said, there
Mm.
you are, you see, I told you. So they do discuss it. And has always been a very good actor
But yes, yes, he's
and a nice
tremendous.
man.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I
And
just.
that bit, the bit about the photograph, did you? I was driving out one day when I've been,
Yes.
and there's a person who always waited at the gate at Key Street.
Mm.
And as I came out in my car, he's stop, stop, stop. He jumped. So I opened the window and I said, "You don't want me, mate?" He said, "I do. You're Jim, you're the vicar. I've got everyone else. I want you a picture. Will you?" So I'll go to the opening of an envelope. So I pulled in. I said, "Yes, of course." And I got out and he said, who can, and David was walking up.
Mm.
And he said, this man said, David, David, will you take a picture of me and Jim? So David said, of course I will, Arthur. He knew the fellow, you know, he's out
Yeah,
there
yeah,
every
yeah.
day. So I'm standing with my arm around this chap. And David Nielsen, one of the most famous faces in the country, is taking our picture.
Mm.
And to his credit, David said, I bet you get this all the time, don't you, Jim? You know, all good fun. You can't take
Yeah.
it seriously, you know.
No, no. So, um, I want to get onto the Royal Family, but
Right.
before we do, I was very pleased and surprised actually to read in your book that you are a big fan of someone that Carolyn Aherne is a giant fan of, someone who's clearly a giant influence on the Royal Family, Mike Leigh. You mentioned Mike Leigh, and obviously the Royal Family's indebted to Mike Leigh in so many different ways. Carolyn herself has said Abigail's party was like the thing that got it started for her, you know, in terms of putting this stuff together. So
Yeah.
talk to me about Mike Leigh in general, like because I'm a giant fan as well. Like, how did you get into him?
He probably thinks I'm his stalker
Yeah, you
because
send him a lot of letters, right? Or you want to?
I've written a few times. No, I've
Yeah,
written 3 or 4 times
have you?
to the
Yeah,
company and had nice
yeah, yeah, yeah.
replies, but he's never come back. But we are connected at the hip because his father was a doctor in Salford.
Mm,
And Mike Leigh is maybe 6 months older than I am.
yeah, yeah,
And we used to pass Dr. Lee's surgery every day going to school.
yeah,
Didn't know him, didn't know anybody.
yeah,
Mike
yeah.
went to a different school. Then he went to Salford Grammar. I was at the local Catholic school. He was Jewish. And then, of course, I've always followed him because,
Mm-hmm.
fa fa firstly, I suppose, because I thought that's Mike Leigh from Higher
Yeah.
Brook, where we lived. And then I am a great admirer of his. Yes.
I mean, yeah, like, have you seen Hard Labor, which has Liz Smith in Royal Family's Liz Smith?
I I can't remember that
Yeah,
exact
it's a Play
one,
for
but
Today, an early
I
one.
had
Yeah.
spoken to one of our actors who was in our agency and said, "Oh, been doing a film for that bloody Mike Lee. He's daft." She said, "I said, what's the matter?" He wasn't famous at the, she said he
Yeah.
made you go out to the bus stop and stand at the bus stop and talk to people. He said, you have to talk to them as if you're one of them, and all that. I said, does he? But you're supposed to be acting, don't you get stripped? She said, do you, bugger? You don't get anything. So he was off the wall, but it worked. And he gets some magnificent
Well,
performance. Timothy Spall.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing though. Anyone that works with him, it's pretty much their best work. And they keep going back, and and you yourself, you've just said, but you also in the book, like you admire his way of developing characters in that way. Is that something you would love to be a part of, like his next movie? I'm guessing,
Oh, yes, of course. And
obviously.
everyone's complaint is they don't get a fair crack of the whip.
Yeah.
Mine, it's not a complaint, it's just the way it is. I said that we're the most unimportant actors, and that is true.
Mm,
So when you're in Corrie, you go in, you get it done, you go home, end of story.
yeah.
They haven't
Yeah.
got time to mess about with you. So you
No.
don't get the things that you get in films. And that's why a performance I can live with was as Robbie Brewer in Jimmy Grimble,
Mm.
because in a feature film, it films for 3 months and lasts for 2 hours. Now, by that criteria, the soaps are doing 2 feature films a week.
True
So
though.
the difference is immense. I'm not knocking
Yeah.
soap
Yeah.
acting.
You're right.
I've done enough of it. But they took that main scene of mine, my close up, maybe 20 times. And
Mm.
then when they got to Ray, they only did it half a dozen times because he was so much better. But when you're in for a short time, you don't get the attention that a lot of actors do. With Mike Lee, everybody gets the
Yeah.
attention. And it's an ensemble piece. And
Hmm.
in the one about the lady who used to do abortions. I've forgotten the name of
Oh,
it.
Vera Drake.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gosh, you are knowledgeable. In Vera Drake, apparently, at the end, when the police come to arrest her, nobody in the house at the meal knew what was going to go on. It was
Wow.
going to be another scene completely. And suddenly, police burst in the doors and and everybody was just gobsmacked, and they just said what came out. And then by the time he'd cut it, it was a one. Now, when you know that, you see that scene,
Yeah.
you can see the look of dismay on people's faces like an actor. My line is coming up. God almighty, what's happened there? And the police came and arrested Vera Drake and took
Yeah.
her kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh,
So
it's
to get that kind of attention is not something many actors get unless they demand it.
no.
They can, once you're a big name and I've heard of Christian Bale since going off on a
Oh, yeah, famously, yeah.
and I don't agree with him doing that, but I can see
No.
where it's coming from. Because if you've got a difficult scene to play,
Yeah.
don't mean that, and you go on and you kill it, man, you've done it. And then suddenly the director will have to go again. We missed the sound or something. That would drive
Yeah,
him
yeah.
mad because he's been up all night knowing his lines.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. It's and you mentioned Vera Drake there. It's interesting because Chris O'Dowd, who's in like the IT crowd,
Yeah, yeah,
various things. He's in Vera Drake very briefly at the start. I think he's only in it for 2 minutes. But he
right.
was on a podcast talking about Mike Lee, and it was like the amount of stuff they would go into for, what is effectively what you did in the Velvet Goldmine, that sort of thing. It is wild. But the royal family, then, like, you're clearly an avid fan of culture and TV and in general. Do you remember it coming out? Do you remember the
Yes,
reaction
I
to it?
do. Yes, and I'll tell you why. Ralph Little, his
Yes.
father was a friend of mine socially.
Mm,
I knew him through various bits and bobs around Bury and Lancashire where we lived.
right.
Then he split up with his wife. They had a tragedy, which I won't mention in the
Sure.
family, and they split up. And his wife Eileen was my accountant for the
Yeah.
next 20 years, but I still kept in touch with Michael. Now, Eileen would bring Ralph to see me in Panto at Rochdale when he
Mm,
was a kid
mm.
and so on. And I did know Ralph, and he was a lovely lad, very clever, by the way, a very clever
Oh, yeah.
boy. And Michael said to me at a social event one day, he said, uh, Ralph's in this thing, it's called the Royle Family. What I said, is it about royalty? He said, no, it's about Royal or a YLE. Will you watch it and tell me what you think? I said, of course I will. So I watched it.
Mm.
And I said to Michael phoned me straight after. I said, Michael, it'll either be the greatest thing since sliced bread or forget it. I said, but to me, it could be brilliant. But when all said and done, it's just people sitting on the settee talking about telly. He
Yeah.
said, yes, I thought that. I don't think it's going to do anything for them. And the rest was history.
Well, Ricky
And you know that
Tomlinson is
Ralph,
quoted as saying the same thing, like literally what you just said. He said the same thing. Like, so
right, right.
it's
And Ralph was at Bolton School, one of the best schools around the
oh
Manchester.
yeah,
Yeah.
medicine,
And
right? Wasn't he doing?
he was very bright. And he was going to Cambridge to do medicine
Yes, yeah.
when Series 2 came up. And
Mm.
then he had a choice. So he said he would defer. You don't defer at Cambridge.
Right,
He was
yeah,
gone.
yeah, yeah.
After he'd done Series 2, he got in at Manchester to do medicine.
Mm.
And then apparently, Eileen told me that he's not going to do medicine now, Ralph. He's doing Series 3 or whatever. And
Fair enough.
Caroline said to him, I'll take you to my agent in London if you want to do it. And so that was the path he took.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder because when he had his spat a few years ago with some government minister, and he
Mm.
was always holding his own against them with having a left-wing leaning outlook like a lot of actors had. His intelligence came out. He stopped it now, and he's engaged or married to an American girl, and he's done
Right,
his
right.
stint on um, I've forgotten the name of it now, but
Hmm.
he is a very clever boy and a very interesting man and very thoughtful. You
Mm.
wouldn't think so, seeing him in the royal family, but that's partly him and it's partly Caroline.
What? And he went from smash to smash. He went from Royal Family to Two Pints of Lager and a Packet of Crisps, which had like 100 episodes or something. And now, obviously,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's a completely
And then
new.
he came out of 2 pints because Eileen phoned me once and she said, I'm really upset. I said, why are you upset? She said, Ralph's pulling out of 2 pints of lager. I said, why is he doing that? She said, he doesn't want to be typecast as a kind of waster or a young. And I said, well,
Mm.
good luck to him. She said, no, but you've no idea how much money he's earning from that and he won't get it anymore. So
Yeah,
it became maybe a surprise hit. Will Mellor, of course, was very good in it.
yeah, yeah.
The two girls, I've forgotten the names, have both gone on to
Sheridan Smith, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
of
one of them.
course. So
Hmm.
he pulled out of his own volition. And when I did my royal family, and he wasn't there that day, I said to Jeffrey Hughes, I said, where's Ralph? He said, oh, he's had a row. Ralph wouldn't come and do it because Granada wanted to pay them all the same money they'd earned 8 or 9 years ago, and
Mm.
Ralph wouldn't do it, you know.
Mm.
So uh, they paid him what he wanted in the end. So they're all little things that you're not
Interesting.
always aware of.
Did you have any run-ins with any of the other cast before you were in this? Did you ever meet Caroline or?
I met Ricky
Yeah.
Tomlinson. I can't trying to remember because I was also in Cracker when he was the policeman.
Yes. Oh, sorry. One of the things I wanted to mention was you unsuccessfully auditioned for Cops,
Yeah,
which so many. It's more early doors than Royal Family. You mentioned John Henshaw, the great John Henshaw, but
yeah,
so many people in this kind of world seem to be part of Cops. It's one of those shows.
yeah, yeah. And they had a different way of casting that. They
Mm.
did it with improvisation all the time.
Yes.
I was quite good at improvisation, though I say so myself.
Yeah.
And I got through to the final two with somebody who finished up being a regular, and he was nervous and I don't know what to do. And I said, don't worry, I'll make you look like a star. And he finished up getting in it.
Mm.
But, and I didn't, and I told you the director was naughty there because he said to me, how tall are you? And I said, 5'9". He said, it just fit you, this uniform. And I thought, oh, I've cracked it.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever said that to me before. Of course, I never heard
It's
anything.
awful that you said that. It's
Yeah.
terrible. I
Yeah.
know.
So he put me in Promised Land and then I heard
Yeah.
nothing. And I mean, I'm not saying John Henshaw got my part, but John, no, John and I were uh, always bumping into each other as
Mm.
extras and at auditions for
Right.
small parts when we
Yeah.
both kind of graduated. And
Mm.
I was once with him and I got an advert for Bird's Eye out of
Mm.
100 people because I can pull a funny face and it happened to work this time. John was the only actor of our. He came up to me about 3 minutes. Hey, bloody Alex, I've seen it. It's great. I said, well, it was just my turn, John. No, it bloody wasn't. You were bloody good, and that's why you got it. So I've always had a lot of time for him,
Oh, John.
and he's lovely, and he really is like that.
Oh, and yeah, he's a tremendous actor. Obviously, he's on the Royal Family as Roger briefly.
Tremendous character.
Oh,
It's hard to see him playing anything else, but I've never seen him play anything where he hasn't been sympathetic and people take to him off screen. They just think there's John and they like him.
did
The
you ever
same
see?
applies to Bill Tarmy in its
Oh
way.
yeah.
You know, you couldn't imagine Bill as anything else particularly,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
people loved him.
So, getting into your part on the show. So obviously the Royal Family had came and gone to a certain extent. We had the run from 1998 till the 2000, the final Christmas special, and then there's a gap of 6 years. And then we come back for the Queen of Sheba. This is a very exciting thing. Obviously, it was kind of under wraps for a time. Like, how did you become aware of it? And then how did that lead to the phone audition with Caroline and Craig?
I only became aware of it the morning of my 10 minutes before my phone audition. That's
Right.
the only time I'd because my agent phoned. I was at home and she said, stay by your house phone. You're going to get a call from Caroline Aherne in 10 minutes and Craig Cash will be on conference call with her.
Mm,
So stay on your house phone. I didn't know much about mobile phones at the time
yeah,
anyway. And practice your Irish accent.
of course. Yeah.
So I thought, what's that all about? I couldn't. Anyway, Caroline phoned exactly 10 minutes later. She said, hiya, Jim. Hey, listen, I'm sorry to ask you this, but we need an Irish priest for next Monday when we start filming. This was Caroline, leave it to the last minute.
Mm-hmm,
She said,
mm-hmm.
we like your picture, but we want to know if you can do a proper Irish accent. So I was by now a club singer and comic doing working men's clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to put jokes in because you got more money if you were a comic. I keep talking about money, don't I? But I had to live.
It's real.
And because both of my parents were Irish and all my family and my uncle were all Irish, I had a decent Irish accent.
Yeah.
So she said to me, say something with an Irish accent. So I launched into a bit of my act because at the time, you'll have to forgive me now, I used to tell Irish gags because they were all the rage at the
Yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
I wouldn't do it now. I couldn't do it. But
Mm-hmm.
at the time, it was. And so I went into something like, my cousin Patrick O'Shaughnessy, Aloysius O'Halloran came over to England and he became a hippie. And he went into chemist and he said to the fella behind the counter, say, man, say, do you have any Aspro ring-a-ding-ding? He said, no, but I've got some X-Lax, boop-boopy-doop. No, I'm sorry about that, but
No, no, I love hearing
so
it. I wanted to ask you to do some.
So she said to me, all right, shut up, you've got the job. And behind her, Craig said, you're going to be ordained on Saturday. And so we went to the read through on
I
Saturday,
can't believe you were at the read through with everyone. That is insane.
every single one.
Oh
And
my God.
did I say where the read through was?
You may have mentioned, but where was it?
The Groucho Club.
Yes, of course, the
The
legendary
Groucho
haunt.
Club. There
Yeah.
was nobody there because it was daytime. It was
Yeah.
Saturday daytime. And we started filming on the Monday. And I had 10 days of the most absolute bliss. And it was filmed at the Granada studio, the big number 6 studio.
Mm,
It's a BBC program, but they hired the main
yes.
studio at Granada, which I didn't know. I thought, why am I going to Granada for this? And I've worked in that big studio many times. That's where they did Corrie at the time before they built stage one next door.
Can we just go back to the Groucho Club briefly? Can you just paint us a picture then? Because there's no photos. Is it just like 40 people, like in a big table, or like?
It's in America, it's called a table read.
Yeah, yeah.
And in my opinion, it's always the most exciting day in any series.
It
I did it
seems
for
it seems
several
like it.
months.
Yeah, they should always film them. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I never thought
Mhm.
of that. You always go to London.
Yeah.
It's normally a trestle table in a square. The actors sit round that, and every other important person at all to do with the production turns up.
Hmm.
The executives come down and give you a little pep talk.
Yeah.
Um, there are the heads of costume, props, camera, lighting, sound, everything. And they are all there. And the cast read maybe 3 episodes. In this case, it was only one episode.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is the last chance for all of these important people to see what's going on and to suggest
Right.
changes. And the slightly worrying thing for people like me is if they don't like you at that read through, it's their last chance to get rid of you.
Yeah. Right.
Now they can get rid of an Irish priest easily,
Oh yeah.
but they can't get rid of Anthony or any of the
Or
regulars there.
Twiggy. No,
So
it's
we small part players were all a bit on edge. Anyway, on the Monday, I got a new script with more lines in it, so everything was okay. And I sailed through it with Caroline's help because they also had I'm sorry if I'm rambling a
no,
bit.
please. It's the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, right. Yes. The director ostensibly was a man called Mark Mylod.
Yes.
Now he is very famous now,
Huge.
even huge.
Succession.
He is executive producer of Succession, as you said. But Caroline was the boss.
Hmm.
Nothing was ever said. There was never any trouble. But Mark would come down and say, I think we should do this, that, and that, this, and this. And Caroline said, oh, that's smashing, Mark. Yeah. And she would suggest a little bit of something else.
Right.
And he always demurred to her,
Hmm.
and always
Hmm.
gave in.
Yeah.
And it was lovely. It was very harmonious. But without saying anything, she was the boss. I had some lovely scenes. They've gone, I think, forever
Mm.
with Peter Martin. Peter
Right.
Martin, my old friend
Yeah,
from
yeah, of
the
course.
Unigate Milkman,
Yes.
and I knew him for many years before that. But Peter and I had a lovely Joe. He was the next door neighbour, Joe,
Mm.
and he got a bit drunk at the wake, and he and the priest was getting drunk as well. Were sharing a bottle of whiskey in the kitchen.
You are holding a bottle at the end, so I
I
didn't wonder where
know,
you
I
got that.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
And Joe said, Father, I've got a friend and he was in the war and he had his legs shot off. Oh, James, I'm sorry to hear that, Joe. Well, you see, he's just died. Oh, well, what a shame. He said, now what I want to know, Father, is this. Does he get a cheap funeral because there's only 3/4 of him to bury? Now that's Caroline, isn't it? He's
It's
lost his
great.
leg,
I
this
wish
poor
that
man,
scene was in the
and he's
show.
died. And
Oh.
the priest getting a bit and said, well, Joe, it doesn't work like that. Well, it should work. And they go on like this.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we did this scene,
Yeah.
Peter and I,
God.
and Caroline came down from the gallery and she came up to me and she said, this was my first scene, so it was important.
Mm.
Oh, she said, Jim, we can't stop Craig. He's on the floor up there laughing. And honestly, when we wrote it, we didn't think it was that funny. Thank you so much. And I'm now on top of the world.
Yeah.
And she said to me, now, Jim, could you just, and she told me a completely different way of doing it.
Mm.
And she said she wanted it doing like that. And she walked away.
Yes.
So I said to Peter Martin, I said, Peter, she's just told me how much she likes. And yet he said, do it. I said, yes, but he said, don't know, if Caroline says do it, do it. And I did it the way she wanted and the way she told, and it was 10 times better.
Yes.
So you see, number one, she's a genius. Number two, you can't see yourself. So
No.
you don't really
No.
know what's coming out. And
Now,
so that's the kind of, and at the end of she bought everyone a lottery ticket at the end and gave a big party in a hotel down the road for all the cast. And it was lovely.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was one of the nicest people. I'm fawning over her because she's gone, but she really was a
yeah.
genius.
Yeah, yeah. And just before we delve a little bit deeper into the episode, we skipped over the Peter Martin, obviously Joe, the Unigate milkman. Can you extrapolate this a little for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, I went for an audition in Manchester and I got the part because I pulled my funny face and it was a national advert for Unigate milk.
Hmm.
So we went down and the director was lovely and we
Which is
started.
like an old brand of milk, sorry, just for our millennials.
Yes,
What is
yes. And
Unigate? Yeah.
this brand of milk, thank God, was never seen in Manchester. It was Yorkshire and other parts of the country.
Okay.
And I was working away and doing this,
Mm.
and I saw my director arguing with two of the people who came, and it turned out that they were from Unigate Milk. And they were shaking their heads, and he was nodding, and they were shaking. And then the director came up to me and he said, I'm sorry, but they think you're too young. And
Mm.
so we'll have to replace you,
Yeah.
but you will be paid. And I got £300 for the day. But wait a minute. And so obviously I was upset and I didn't know who got it. And when I saw it, Peter Martin, who was an extra on it, got the part. And I'd known him from before. And when I saw him to do It might have been Emmerdale when he was in Emmerdale or something. Oh, no, he was in Corrie, wasn't he, for a while? It
Uh,
was Coronation Street.
no, it was Emmerdale. He was in Emmerdale.
I know he was in
Oh,
Emmerdale,
sorry. Was he in
but
Corrie as well? Interesting.
and he might anyway.
Yeah.
And I said to him, Peter, how did you go on with that Unigate milkman thing? And this was maybe 8 years later.
Mm.
He said, no, you don't want to know. I said, no, I don't. He said, look, I don't want to tell you, Jim. He said, I'll be honest. I said, why not? He said, well, he said, I got £100,000 for the first year and I got that for the next 5 years. And, you know, I opened Fates. I got all the rest of the parts that he got since there on the back of it because of that one advert. And he became a figurehead of Jewson, who was a tool firm and he was a Jewson person.
Yes, yes, Jewson.
So I said,
Okay.
oh, well, all right, that's the way it goes. And for a few weeks, I was thinking about it. But
Yeah.
then when I went back to do something else about a year, that was before I met Helen. So
Yes.
if they'd have given me that kind of money, I'd have been dead.
Right,
I,
right,
I
right.
was so big time and drinking so much, I'd have
Uh,
gone off my head. There's no doubt about that. And I
mhm.
met Helen and I settled down and so on. And when I met Peter 7 or 8 years later, he said, oh, I said, I'm sick of it. I'm skint. Don't know what. I said, how can you be skint? He said, because I'm running my son's family and he had one of his grandchildren had special needs and needed 24-hour care. And he was taken up with that and his whole life was paying for that. And I thought to myself, it isn't worth worrying about.
Mm.
And if I'd have got that, I might never have met Helen.
Yeah,
I might not have had Andrew and
yeah.
Lucy, who, so I've come to terms with it. I would have taken it. And but if anyone had given me that kind of money in those days, I'd have been off down the clubs. I would have been so big time you wouldn't have seen my heels for the dust.
So in the episode itself, it's towards the end of the Queen of Sheba, which of course is an iconic piece of television. It's after Nana's passed away, and we fade into the lounge, and it's the parties going on, basically, well, the sort of the wake, as it were.
Yeah.
And we see you early on. We do see you go up to Joe, Peter Martin, that we just spoke of, and you just sort of say hello. And then there's a scene cut that you sent me, and is a deleted scene on the DVD, which is a fantastic scene between mostly you and Mary here. And I love the way you play drunk. It's kind of it's quite a funny visage, really, to see that in the wake of the wake, they've brought loads of people back, including the sozzled father. And it's not like you're on the periphery, like you're sitting in the heart of the family, like you're amongst it. I mean, what are your memories of doing these scenes like?
My memories of doing that were of being squashed up on the settee. Now, who was the very good actress who played the girl who couldn't go on a diet?
Oh, Cheryl, Jessica Stevenson. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, terrific.
Um, Concepta from Coronation Street,
Oh,
and we had one or two problems with that because she had a problem learning her lines, but everyone was so good to her that they drew it out of her and it
mm,
was fine. So I really enjoyed being there. And the old chap who shouted out, Father, Father, oh, you're doing a good service there. Well, I've
yeah.
forgotten his name.
Oh, yeah. PJ. I forget the actor's name,
Yeah,
but
that's right. That's
yeah.
right. But the whole, um, and then when Ricky got his banjo out, and I showed
Mm,
that clip, right, and that is the actual end of the episode, isn't it?
it is. It is. Yeah.
And Caroline comes out holding a
With the baby.
baby,
Yeah. Baby
and
Nina.
everyone was very touched because I didn't know at the time, but Caroline couldn't have children, but loved
Yeah.
children or whatever. So when she came out and it all went quiet, it was a really nice, touching moment. And they shot a little bit of a scene of Father Kennedy with the bottle of whiskey going up on the stairlift, up and down,
Right.
and the kids were
Wow.
sending him up and down and he was asleep because he was drunk.
Okay. That's
Irish priest used to like her.
Jim. These scenes that you're telling us about, by the way, this is unknown information in Royal Family
Yeah,
circles. So
yeah,
this
it
is
just come to me. But
it's
there's
wow.
also there's another thing. One of the greatest scenes ever in television, in my opinion, was in that, and it was Nana and Barbara,
Yeah.
the hair and the que
Oh,
sera one. And when
yes.
she
Yes.
says to him, Barbara, I do love you, but well, there's never a dry eye in the house when you show that.
No,
And it is a really beautiful scene.
it is.
But there's a slight mistake in it.
Hmm.
I'm only telling you, but
Yeah, yeah, no, no,
in
please.
that, and perhaps it only occurred to me, but in that scene, Barbara walks, she's doing Nana's hair and she wants to get round to the other side. So they didn't cut. She walked round with her back to the camera, round the camera, and went there. Now, when I saw that, I thought, that's unusual.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen normally.
Hmm.
They either cut or they do it again or something.
Yeah.
As luck would have it, I was up for an advert auditioning 6 months later, and the director was Mark Mylod.
Oh,
So I
right.
thought, oh, I'm in here. I didn't
Yeah,
get it.
yeah.
But I had and he said, how are you? And I said, yeah. I said, now look, that scene he said, I know the one you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me about the scene with Nana. I said, yes. He said, that take when she walked in front of the camera was the first take.
Hmm.
And we tried it afterwards and we never got near. That was the one, and they never approached it later. And somebody said acting is so much in the moment to get. If you ever see a great performance, it's because you're in the moment and you spend the rest of your career chasing that moment, maybe never to get it.
Hmm.
I think it happened then. And it'd be interesting if we maybe we'll speak, but if you watch that scene again,
Hmm.
see if you notice where Barbara
Yeah.
walks
I'll check that out. No, that's really
past
interesting.
the camera. And I think it might, I mentioned it in, oh, years ago on a scene when somebody was saying how good it was. And I mentioned, and they took me to task and said, that's not a mistake. Why would that mean? And I
Hmm.
think possibly they're right. But you don't normally see people walk at, with their
No.
back to the camera. Right. Anyway, maybe that was just me. But that scene was wonderful, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. I'm not a burden to you as well,
That's
and
right.
it's just,
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
it really lands wonderfully. And the whole episode really, obviously visually it's so different to the original show and they're pushing it into a different direction. But it lands. And really there's no new characters outside of you. Like you're only like everyone else is like we've met them before. I mean, okay, some of Cheryl's suitors that we meet briefly, but you come back and then in terms of like what scenes you have, so again, we see you at the start with Joe, and then the next scene in the actual original cut, the iPlayer cut, if you will, we just see you sitting next to Mary, but you weren't there at first. So there is that cut scene of you sitting next to Mary, and then you're talking about Mary. It's a what like the sort of the message of the scene and sort of the philosophy of the scene, I think is wonderful. Where Mary's talking about, isn't it wonderful that God made everyone the same, and you're talking about how every speech is the same, and you're sort of speaking at cross purposes. It's really quite a beautiful moment.
Yes, yes. Uh, I'm glad you picked up on that because that is Caroline as well and
Yeah,
Craig to
yeah.
a T because
Mm,
they are speaking at cross purposes. She's very devout and saying, "Oh, isn't God good?" And that you wonderful speech as if I said, "Well, I use the same speech for them all, Mary, and it seems to work, so I keep and that kind of thing."
yeah.
And I show that scene even though I'm not in it a lot
Mm,
as I've finished to one of my talks. Might do 5 or 6 talks on a
right,
show,
right, right.
and I show it, and I ask people. I say, "This is why I'm showing this as a tribute to Caroline." Really, I said 2 reasons, 2 things to watch out for. Number one, I think you picked up on this when Ricky says, "Father Kennedy has kindly left us the ashes." Then
Mm,
Ricky turns round to pick up the urn off the mantelpiece.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know that there was a picture there?
The original, yeah, that is in Liz Smith's
And
autobiography.
that,
Yeah,
and I had just, when I saw that, I
yeah.
had just read Liz Smith's
Oh, it's brilliant.
autobiography. And
Our
so I
Betty.
recognized that that was actually, and I say to people, that is Liz Smith. I said, now, who would have noticed that and put it on the mantelpiece piece? But Caroline did. And
Yes,
then I
yeah.
would say to them, who knew that Ricky played the banjo? I did from somewhere in the, I said, but
Mm,
how do you get it into a wake? I said, this is how
yeah,
Caroline did it. And it was
yeah.
Caroline, I wanna go jazz,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
get them all singing. So I have
God.
nothing but admiration and sorrow that she's gone, you
And
know.
yeah, of course, and it's a gigantic episode. It is probably most people's favorites. It was a
Yeah.
landmark release. Like, how was there like a release premiere or something like that? Was there a party when it came out, or do you remember it coming out?
I do remember it being
Mm.
transmitted because I was told the week before transmission that my dialogue had all been cut. I had
Yeah.
a call again at home from the executive producer. I
Mm.
thought, I'm getting really important. I'm having a call from the executive producer who said the same thing as Caroline said. Oh, we did laugh at your scenes. And that one with Joe, with the man with only one leg, so he wanted a cheap funeral. Now, that was at cross purposes again. And
Yeah.
take my word for it, it was funny.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I thought, oh, he likes them. That's great. He said, but Caroline always shoots too much.
Mm.
So she had shot an hour and a half and they
Yeah.
had to cut it down to an hour.
Mhm.
So all your dialogue is gone. It's not just me. There was,
No, there's a lot of hospital scenes that got cut. A lot of them, yeah.
yeah, and there was another fine actor who played a boyfriend of Cheryl and went on to Coronation Street. Lovely lad as well, the Yorkshire lad, curly hair. I can't remember his
Oh,
name.
Steve
Oh,
Hewson was it? Maybe.
uh, and he was cut down to almost nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And other people lost their lot completely. So I wasn't as when it came out, I thought, well, that's that. And I hope I haven't told too many people
Mm.
because I'm hardly in it.
Well, they
But
can't.
people do see it and
Yeah.
they still remember it. So it's it's a happy memory for me, but it comes back again from the small part player. When you think about it, you're the one that's got to be cut.
Mm. Mm.
Nobody's going to tune into Corrie to watch a vicar, a postman, a bus driver, a taxi driver, or a
True.
policeman. They're tuning in to watch the stars. They're the ones who made it. So that's the way it has to be.
But like they can't cut you out of the sort of final scenes that you're in, of course, when you're not in the kitchen, you're on the sofa.
Yeah,
And we do see you a fair bit, which is good because a lot of the Royal Family acting wise is facial acting, right? It's how people look at each other, it's the glances, it's those sort of
yes,
miniature moments. So, for instance, when Denise is changing the tone and saying, let's have an upbeat wedding, let's put the fun into funeral, like Nana said, we pan across and there you are. You know, we can see you, we can see your face confused, it drops, you reckon, like, you know what I mean? You're proper on screen, you're not in the corner, you're central.
there are times, yes. And I've seen it so many times now because I show it on a giant screen,
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
cinema type screen, and I do see it going past and I think, oh, yeah, there he is with his bottle. It could be anyone, by the way. I've seen them that many times that it
Right, 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 right,
you
right.
know,
It is
good.
you though. It is you. Like, you know, that is, and we even see when there's a chant to Norma, you're like, to Norma. And then at the end, when everyone's dancing, you're on the sofa with the bottle, which I quite like as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You know,
It does
it's,
bring back happy memories, but looking at it, that's the point I made when we started talking about the further away things get, the more
mm-hmm,
importance they seem to have as well. And
mm-hmm.
nowadays, I do self tapes, which I tape myself for auditions.
Yeah.
This is good because I don't have to go to London and see
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
like
yeah.
that, so I can do it and send it and go. The downside of living down in Eastbourne is my career, if you want, has finished almost, and that's fine because at my age I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I'm only going to, but I have done some quite important things down here. One is on tonight, and it's a very small scene
Yes.
in
In the big
Brass.
show in Brassic. Yeah.
Yeah, but the director in that liked me from the read through, and so paid £300 train fare. That's what it costs them when they buy it.
Yeah.
2 nights in a hotel in Manchester, and we shot the scene, and off you go. Mostly when they want a vicar, they've got 10 vicars back in Manchester, so there's no chance of me ever appearing as an old vicar in Corrie or anything because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
won't pay it. They won't pay. Why should they? So I tend not to get as much work. And so it's that and
Mm.
age. But 2 years ago, I was in a thing with Sir Kenneth Branagh.
Uh,
It was called This England.
it
Did you watch
was the
it
the
before?
Boris Johnson. I didn't actually see your part in that, but you were in quite a few episodes, weren't you?
I, my friend who you can't record from Sky, can you, officially?
It's a
You
bit more
know,
difficult.
you
Yeah.
can put it onto somewhere, but
They'll
uh,
find it on YouTube, unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah, it was on
Mm.
something, and John suddenly sent me an email. Uh, your clip from This England is in the usual place. And I looked, and he had, and I don't even know if this is legal. He had Sky, he put it on, and it was on Sky Atlantic.
Yes.
He put a film camera in front of his television set, pressed it, recorded the episode,
It
edited the
works.
film camera, sent me the clip.
Yeah.
So I've got that clip. And when I show that, I didn't show it for 2 years because it was too painful because I die as a COVID patient.
Sure. Right.
And it is quite harrowing, and it was harrowing to do.
Mm.
And in my main scene, I'll send it you, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
In the main scene that I do, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I tell people in my talks, and when I do use it, there are several people cry because they've lost it. And sometimes I think, is it a bit too soon, or should I
Yeah.
not have shown it? But what happened was, did you hear about the Zoom calls? Here we are. If
Mm.
you were about to die,
Mm.
they would they
Oh, of
couldn't
course. Yes.
anyone
Sorry.
coming
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
you, so they would fix up a Zoom call.
Mm.
So I was lying in bed, seriously ill, intubated. They put an iPad in front of me. Background artist was a nurse, and she had held and I was had a Zoom call with my son and daughter. They were in a room round the corner from
Mm.
where we were
Yeah.
ostensibly at home, and I couldn't. I couldn't act because I had my own nurse in that, a real nurse who wanted it to be authentic. And she came up just before this scene with a little plastic gizmo with a piece attached to it. And I said, "What's that?" She said, "It's an intubate. I'm going to intubate you." I said, "Well, what's that thing hanging down?" She said, "That goes down your nose, down your throat, into your lungs, and we pump air into it." I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." She said, "Oh, you're all right." She was taking the mic. She snipped it off and stuck it on my nose, but put it over my face.
Mm.
But the first thing was, how much pain and discomfort would everyone go through? Can you imagine having a tube, not a small tube, going all that way
I can't.
and so on? And I couldn't, they were talking to me and I couldn't really say anything because I was intubated and very ill. And yet the director said, "Just do your own thing." And he said, "The grandson's been asking for you." Now, I've got three grandsons, and that resonated with me. And I started crying, and I was crying, and he kept it on me in a close up all the time. And then he said, "Right, thank you. That's the end of it. We're going home now. We can't do that again." And I was quite proud of that. And I know that it had some resonance because I saw two of the hard bitten crew walking off the set crying. One was a cameraman and one was a sound man, and they were in floods of tears. Now, it was very harrowing, but that doesn't happen very often. So it sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
And they took those scenes back to London, and because they liked them in the edit, they sent for me again and did me a backstory. So now I was going to be a
Right.
family man instead of. Anyway, I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but
Oh no, that is fact. No, I
I'll
mean
tell you that,
there's
and you
so
can
much
look.
there's so much we can talk about, really, Jim. But I want to push people, if they want to know more, to pick up Imposter by Jim Whelan. I genuinely have loved reading this book. I think this is a very, very well written book. I think the blurb is hilarious as well. I love a searing indictment of the acting profession, an explosive expose of the seedy side of the TV business. Dot 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 is not what you will find here, and it is. It's light-hearted, but it's honest. You're always questioning yourself throughout it, which I felt very refreshing. It's 170 odd pages, and across how many chapters do we have here? It's like 52 chapters. And, this is a compliment. I genuinely wanted it to be longer, but I feel like cram so much in. And we'll put the link down below. I mean, just to wrap up then, like, this book for you, like, how long has it been out? A few years now? 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think it finished during lockdown,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I haven't self-published. I don't know how to do it, so our publisher looked at it and enjoyed it, and so
Yes.
he sent it to me. And now, a side part of that is I take a suitcase full of them on cruises with me,
Oh, yeah.
and because someone told me to do it, and also with P&O, if they can put you down as actor and author, it gives you a bit more clout with them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the last cruise we went to Iceland, we were 60, sold out of books, sold 35. That's all that would fit in the
No,
case.
it's
So
good.
it is nice, and I
Yeah.
sign for people and it makes me feel better.
Well, there's like, there's so much we haven't really touched upon that's in the book. Like, you were a taxi driver for many decades,
Yeah.
alongside this. You had a shoe store, you drove a bus. Like, you've led a full life, I must say.
Well, and I'm not. I'm 82. I play badminton 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Don't take a single tablet except something to stop me peeing more than 3 times a night.
All right.
And I have done nothing to deserve this. My older brother drank himself to death. My
Right.
younger brother smoked and drank. I'm a smoker. I'm an ex-alcoholic. And I've finished up here. My son is a hospital consultant now, you
Yes.
know,
Wow. Wow.
and my daughter, who lives round the corner from us here, is the drama teacher. She, by the way, followed me into the business and was in a thing called At Home with the Braithwaite.
Yes, she was. I couldn't believe that was her.
But she didn't like it.
Yeah.
Uh, and she's very happy. And we see their son and they take no notice of me whatsoever, which is the way it should be. So
Yeah.
I keep thinking to myself, how lucky am I? It could have gone the other way. One, if I'd have got all that money, you can send me a large check if you like. And the other one, if I hadn't have stopped drinking,
Oh,
and
indeed.
so on. But
Indeed.
yeah, but
Well, I
as
guess.
you guess, I love to talk about myself. So thank you very much for
Oh
listening
no,
to
no.
me.
This has been a delight. And as I say, we could have went much deeper. There's so much stuff to get into. But I guess finally, Jim, is there anything you'd like to point people towards? I mean, you're on Twitter, right? Your blog as well.
I am on Twitter, but I don't take it seriously. I'm
Mm.
going to put the clip from Brassic on tomorrow. I won't put it on tonight
Yeah.
because it's plot. So people might say, oh, you spoiled
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I won't put it on till tomorrow, but nothing in particular
Hmm.
is happening. I'm going away on a cruise over Christmas and New Year. I'm
All
as
right.
happy as Larry down here.
Yeah.
Helen's and I are both very well. There are bits falling off because we're getting older, but we're fine. We're okay. And I'm as happy as Larry. So no complaints. We haven't, just so that you know, talked really about the live birds watch or Last of the Summer Wine, which was a big part of my life as well. I did
Yes, of
5 different
course.
characters in that, but for a future day, my dear.
Yes, yes. I would
Roy
love to have you back.
Barraclough.
I would genuinely. So yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's at JimVic1 on Twitter, on X, whatever. And I also, again, just gonna give a plug to Imposter.
No,
I think it's a
don't
terrific
worry.
read. The link is down below. There's so much more detail in everything we've spoken about today. Um, so it's just finally to say, Jim, thank you so much for your time. This has been great.
You're you're very welcome. Thank you for making me feel so much at home and for listening to me. Thanks very much.